Greetings and salutations. This is the voice of Loquacious of Herd, bringing you his afterthoughts on My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Season 6, Episode 11, titled Flutter, Brutter. I heartily suggest you find and watch the episode itself, sans commentary, before proceeding with either this Afterthoughts review or viewing my full reaction, which is hosted at the link in the description. Be warned, this Afterthoughts review will contain spoilers for the episode. With that out of the way, on to the review. This episode has grown on me since my initial viewing, which is not to say that my first impressions were negative. I enjoyed it and found myself quite amused and entertained by the unfolding story and glimpse into Fluttershy's home life. I had some, let's call them difficulties, with the character of Zephyr Breeze, but more on that later. Even though we just had a hearts-warming episode last month, once again the show is bringing me presents. The action opens at the Shy family home in Cloudsdale, where Mr. and Mrs. Shy are entertaining their daughter Fluttershy and their good friend of the family, Rainbow Dash. I was astonished, enthused, and delighted to finally learn a bit more about Fluttershy's family, and what a family it is. Both her parents are soft-spoken ponies with their own passionately quiet interests. Fluttershy's father is retiring from the weather factory and has an impressive collection of mementos, in the form of clouds, from his many years there. Her mother has a garden which, considering that they have to somehow transport Earth from the ground to Cloudsdale, is, I suspect, quite an indulgence. The home is cozy with a familial, lived-in look. Then, before I had time to really shake off the novelty and newness of the whole meet the parents moment, talk turns to Fluttershy's younger brother, the aforementioned Zephyr Breeze. Apparently, the much-indulged baby of the family is something of a problem child, a drifter and a dreamer, flitting from one idea or project to the next, never settling down and devoting himself to anything long enough to make a decent go of it. And, as such, Fluttershy is quite dismayed to hear that Zephyr is, yet again, moving back in with Mom and Dad. Cue an entrance so brashed and self-absorbed that even Rainbow Dash or Trixie would look humble and meek by comparison. The tone of the conflict is set. Zephyr clearly intends to keep right on breezing through life, expecting, and even manipulating, the ponies around him to pick up the copious amounts of slack he leaves behind. Zephyr displays the sort of endearing charm that makes it clear that this particular life pattern may well be the only survival trait he has ever mastered. Mr. and Mrs. Shy, while voicing the thought that they can look out for themselves, quite clearly are not up to dealing with their wayward son. And Fluttershy. Well, I absolutely loved Fluttershy in this episode. So many kudos to the writers, the animators, and to Andrea Libman for bringing our favorite Shy Pegasus's personality to glorious life throughout the entire affair. Bravo! You see, while back in Season 1, the extra meek and shy Flutters of old might have just rolled over and taken it with barely a squeak of protest. Fluttershy is done. She is having none of her brother's charming, flighty laziness, and she is willing to stand up to him, confronting him on his quitter's ways and the entirely unacceptable way that he is treating their parents. After all, it's one thing to move back in with your folks due to life circumstances. It is entirely another thing to make them do the amount of work and reorganization in their own homes and lives that Zephyr casually expects. You could build a cathedral with the amount of granite he's taken his family for. So right from the get-go, Fluttershy locks horns with her brother in an internal family squabble, a power struggle to see if Zephyr will continue to do as he has always done, the minimum to get by, with that minimum being getting others to do his work for him, or if he will finally make something of himself. The story unfolds in an unsurprising manner overall. After realizing that her parents can't effectively stand up for themselves, Fluttershy steps up to protect them from her brother's mooching ways. Her brother tries to twist and turn, but he's no more suited to winning a confrontation against a determined adversary than he is at anything else that requires work, devotion, or the sort of stick-to-itiveness that earned Tank his name. So Zephyr caves, only to move in with Fluttershy. Flutters works with her brother, insisting that if he's to stay under her roof, he needs to have a job. While Zephyr would rather do his job hunting work tomorrow, Fluttershy gets it set up for today, and not just one job prospect, but several are in the works. This is good because Zephyr's single great talent remains a Tom Sawyer-esque ability to convince others to do their work on his behalf, or at least to try to. He blows off the terrible mistakes that result from his seeming inability to even try to do an honest day's labor as some sort of creative endeavor for which he should be thanked. Silver Tongue and Quick Wit con Spike into doing all the real work at Twilight's castle, only this is a matter of cleaning windows rather than painting white picket fences. And while I am trying to keep from noting too many of the background tidbits, I can't help but give a shout out to the Zelda reference as Fluttershy and Zephyr are leaving Twilight's castle behind. Link, in pony form, goes trotting by in the background with a cartload of the most rupee-like gems Equestria has to offer. Back to the conflict. Zephyr simply won't work. He is a NEET to the core, with NEET being an acronym for Not in Education, Employment, or Training. So Fluttershy holds true to her requirements as a host and gives her layabout brother the boot. He storms off to try his hoof at living off the land. Let's just say it didn't go well. Why, in the movie Castaway, it took Tom Hanks' character several days before he wounds himself unsuccessfully trying to start a fire, then throws a frustration-fueled tantrum of demolition, and then starts talking to an inanimate object, which he named Wilson. Zephyr? Well, the homage to the aforementioned scene couldn't have taken more than an hour or two to reach. Daring wilderness adventurer he ain't, folks. Now at rock bottom, we finally get to some of the key driving forces behind Zephyr's behavior and Fluttershy's understandable frustration with her loved younger brother. Behind the bluster, the smooth talk, and the vast ego, Zephyr is wildly unsure of himself. The thing he fears most is that he will choose a task, pour his heart and soul into it, put forth his best effort, and fail. That he will not be able to accomplish something. Failure is so painful to him that he prefers to avoid effort altogether. Better to quit than to try and fail. He'll do anything, use anyone, to keep from failing, which, for him, really means that he'll do anything to keep from trying. And he points out, in a rather evasive way, that Fluttershy doesn't just try and succeed, she's so good at the business of life that she's a national hero. A many times over national hero. With his own issues, this is only extra intimidation, yet one more push to keep Zephyr from trying. Because even if he did have some small success, how could that possibly measure up to the sort of things that the element of kindness has done? Again, fear of failure, a retreat into flighty inactivity. And, like his namesake, he'll just float on the winds, going with the flow, and getting those around him to do what he needs for as long as he can. But that time is finally over. And through all this, Fluttershy is totally on point. It annoys her so much to see her baby brother acting like this because Zephyr truly does have potential. It takes skills, wits, charisma to manage this sort of lifestyle that he's been living for years. If he would only turn his natural gifts of mind and improvisation to actually doing something, anything, then with the support of those around him, he could find things that he could actively do and succeed at doing. He could find and make a place for himself in the world where he's not simply being a parasite, a destructive, self-indulgent one at that. With a firm guiding hoof from Fluttershy, who has been supported through this whole ordeal by Rainbow Dash, again kudos for a spot-on portrayal of the deep and long-term friendship those two have shared, Zephyr makes a try, a real try, at something he actually enjoys and feels passionately about. Cue the musical number, and at the end of it, behold, a success. Perhaps not the greatest, but as Zephyr comments, he honestly didn't believe he could succeed at anything. On to the resolution. Sometime later, Zephyr has succeeded in getting his training completed. He has a vocation now, and prospects, though we leave him once again asking to crash at his parents' place for a few days while he gets his employment situation together. 2 steps forward, 1 step back? Perhaps, but given the, uncomfortably rapid amount of growth that this newly introduced Shy has undergone, in retrospect, it feels more like the sort of healthy getting a hoof from your folks sort of thing that families do for one another, than the wildly dysfunctional way this episode dove into Zephyr's role in Flutter's family dynamics. Zephyr is a difficult character for me to like. I believe that he is supposed to be, so once again, kudos to the writers for making him fit his role to a T. Seeing a character with his kind of quick wit, making use of it only to avoid even trying to make a go at an independent life, all while acting in a frankly abusive manner to his kind and loving family, that's the sort of thing that makes me, well, peeved. His own underlying issues make his behavior understandable. even relatable. But do they make it excusable? Perhaps, perhaps not. It would be more excusable, certainly, with some gesture of repentance, some acknowledgement that he had done wrong by his family, and that felt lacking to me. As a result, for the majority of the episode, his character managed something that very few characters in Friendship is Magic have ever managed. I found him largely unlikable. Not villainous or antagonistic, for I've often found myself liking the roles taken by other antagonists and villains, just unlikable. Now, there are plenty of laugh-out-loud moments of comedy with the character. He works so wonderfully for the story they're telling, and his character progression has him nicely set up to become a far better pony than he began the episode as. But, if he's to have any reappearances, it will likely take me a bit to warm up to him. But they might have him in background some. Heck, given his chosen profession, I could see him working at the Ponyville Spa. Which leads to the final analysis. My problems with his character are insufficient to seriously detract from my joy in everything else this episode did so gloriously, brilliantly, wonderfully right. Even Zephyr Breeze gets a pass in my books, less from his own winning charm and easy manner than from his sister's rock-solid performance in helping him better himself. A well-presented lesson in moral, the spot-on roles Fluttershy's friends had, even though his appearance was only brief, and the additional world-building that comes with learning more about a main character's family. All of these make this episode so much fun for me. If you wish to see my full reaction to My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Season 6, Episode 11, titled Flutter, Brutter, the link, as I mentioned earlier, is in the description. Feel free to leave any comments or likes for that reaction here on this Afterthoughts review. And until next time, as always, kindly remember, y'all are awesome. Stay awesome.